Yeah. So thanks everyone for staying. We will focus this panel on investments in travel tech. So we've heard the numbers. Travel is huge, huge market. We see a lot of a growing number of startups in travel. Just here, I think we have about 30 or 40 of them today. But the notion is that it's not a smooth ride to raise money, and therefore we have this great panel. So why don't we start with a quick intro for those who don't know these guys. So Eran, start with you.
So my name is Eran Barkat. I'm a partner at BRM Group.
Hi, my name is Ariel Yosefi. I'm a partner at HFN Law Firm. I'm the head of the Technology and Regulation Department.
Hi, Yossi Moldavsky, Plus Ventures, investing in early-stage startups.
Liat Aronson, it says Zell there, and I'm still very involved, but I'm also a partner at Marker, which is, I guess, why I was invited here, other than Zell. But we do have a lot of travel companies coming out of Zell, too, so maybe because of that.
And I'm Gigi. I used to be an entrepreneur, then executive, then investor, angel investor, and then recently I have an accelerator in the Silicon Valley called NFX.
So great, we'll talk about all these. But I actually want to start, Liat, about, we'll start with Zell actually.
Never gonna leave
just
you.
because
Never gonna leave
you
you.
mentioned that and because you've done how many? 13 classes? How many?
We're right now in the 16th
No, you
class,
did.
but 10.
10, right, so 10. So it's quite a big number of startups growing out of there, sprouting out of there. Did you see any main difference with travel-oriented startups in terms of challenges, the challenges to raise money in comparison to other verticals?
Interesting. I think the travel companies that have come out of Zell, like many other companies that have come out of Zell that are consumer-focused, naturally have a challenge raising funds in Israel. And I think travel in particular falls that. And following a lot of these Zell ventures who have gone from B2C to B2B, that seems to be a little bit of a solution. And I think in many ways the Zell program is a microcosm of what's going on in the ecosystem. And I think that is probably reflective now in companies that I see that are in travel outside of Zell.
And now with Marker, did you invest anything in travel?
Not directly related in travel, but we do have a lot of companies that are marketing services, and so in that way relate to it.
Mm-hmm. And Eran, as a VC,
Yeah.
what's your perspective on that? I know you've invested in Rumor, right?
Yeah, we invested in Rumor, basically out of Zell. And then we also have Moveit, which is travel, transportation. Sometimes
There's a very wide definition of travel.
yeah, people also say that Uber is part of travel. So if Uber can be
Google,
part-
you also search for hotels.
So I would say 4 challenges that I think companies have in general in the travel industry, and then I'll be a little bit more specific about Israel. So first of all is that the demand side is basically today controlled by Expedia and Priceline, and it's very, very difficult to succeed in the demand side. It's very consolidated market. On the technology platform side, I would say it's a very legacy. Nothing was really changed in the last 30 years. So there's a lot of challenges, but also opportunities in this specific place. That's in general the problem, I would say. Also, relatively very small exits, which means that VCs doesn't really, I mean, they cannot see really a big exit that can take their fund far away. And the last thing that is specifically to Israel, that there's no domain expertise. We don't have none of the big players having establishing something here in Israel, which means that the best management people that usually after that becoming entrepreneurs, we don't have them here in Israel. So it's very challenging. We need more people like Rom and more people that coming from the industry from abroad. Maybe some companies that will buy Israeli companies and will establish their headquarter here or whatever. I think that's the main challenges that we have.
Gigi, what's your perspective on that in Israel, and then we'll talk about Silicon Valley.
I think that at the end of the day, travel is one of the more, forgive me everybody, one of the more depressing areas in startups for a very specific reason. The reason is that there are a few companies out there that basically suck all the value out of the ecosystem. When you look at travel, you need to look at B2B versus B2C. There are two different things. On the B2C side, the biggest problem right now is that customer loyalty is very low. And so whatever business you're building, your first transaction needs to cover your customer acquisition costs. Being that there's all these huge companies out there that are spending enormous amounts of money on acquiring customers all the time, your chance of getting a customer cheaply is close to zero. And so your transaction needs to be very large. That's the reason why the only B2C companies that raise serious amounts of money anytime recently are what's called the new, the whatever, 3.0 travel agents like Lola and a company that I invested in NFX called Kim. What they do is they do the full trips for the user, meaning that once the user books, it's a 5 to 15,000 booking, and so the ticket size is big enough to cover the CPAs. In most cases, what happens is that because the loyalty is so low, your chance of covering the CPA is not there. And so the chances of winning are very, very low. If you add on top of it the fact that the margins of startups are always dramatically lower than the margins that Priceline and Expedia managed to get out of hotels and later on out of airlines and so on, then you're squeezed not just because the CPAs are high and they have the larger budgets and so on, and they have bigger brands, but also because your margins on the product is lower. Which means that the B2C in travel right now is almost it's almost like a death zone. There's no investments, no VCs are investing, not just in Israel, also in the Valley. And I can later on explain what's the exceptions, but almost nothing's happening because the general concept, the general perception is that nothing can beat the current ecosystem until something really dramatically different. It's going to couple like an Airbnb, right? So creating new inventory or creating something which is completely different. Not in the same supply chain. On the B2B side, it's very different. The B2B side, basically, there are two elements. There's selling to the OTH, to the online travel agents, which is clearly, they're huge companies. If you can sell to them, that's great, but that's a tough thing. And there's selling to the hotels or the airlines directly, which if you have something great, they will buy off you quite happily because they're looking for things to help them against the margin stealing presence of the OTAs. And so whoever managed to create a B2B service that basically provides the hotels, the airlines, more margin, sees that sales are relatively easy. Clearly, there's no the marketing cost and there's no the B2C cost. But then what also happens is that because the general perception is that all these individual hotels are going to lose and everybody who's independent is going to lose right now, VCs still don't invest in it. So in terms of investments, that's also a death zone. So right now, raising funds for travel has become, other than seed, right? In seed, you can come with a great idea and you can raise the first $1 or $2 million. But raising the next round that you need, the $5 to $10 million, has become almost impossible. In Israel, almost completely. And in the Valley, it's also incredibly tough.
So seed investments, Yossi, you're a seed investor, early stage investor. You also run an incubator. We've invested together in a travel company. So what are the alternatives?
I would say I agree. I totally agree with what was said. It's a difficult vertical, and it's not easy to invest, and it's very risky. As we see it, investing at early stage is risky anyway. But in travel, you need to take a big risk, and you need to believe that something can come out of it. While the things that you have, the metrics that you see you don't have actually. You just have an idea usually, at the stage at least that we invest. Luckily for us, we invested more than a decade ago in a company called Travel Fusion. And after more than a decade, it was sold for $160-something million to Ctrip, the Chinese company. So we have some good experience, and maybe it gave us a bit more confidence to continue to invest in that field. But we are open to plenty of verticals. We are open to sports, we are open to leisure, we are open to entertainment, we are also open to travel. I think recently we've made another investment in a company called Splitty, which created a booking agent that tries to split the hotel reservation and to maximize the value for the customer by splitting by splitting the order. Instead of ordering 5 days, just ordering 1 day and 4 days, or 2 days and 3 days. At the end of the day, you can save between 5% to 20% of your reservation costs. So in general, we are open to that. You mentioned the incubator. As an incubator operators, we operate Explore, which is an incubator. We find it difficult to approach the chief scientist with projects that are travel related. He is more focused and more looking at real deep technology, and big chunk of the travel startups are not about technology. Of course, they have some technology, but the main issue is maybe the business model or the way, the idea behind it. It's less about technology, and once we present it to the chief scientist, we need to find ways to see, to explain how deep the technology can be and how it can be something beyond just a travel booking, a travel agency, a travel tool.
Thanks. Ariel, out of HFN and your portfolio, startups and investors and their portfolios, do you see the same trend or same difficulty, challenges?
Yeah, I think there are, in this industry, there are similar challenges to other technological industries, but there are 3 types of challenges that are quite unique to the travel tech industries. 2 of them are specifically relevant for travel tech. One of them is more generic, but its implications to travel tech is making this more challenging or more complicated. The first is the tight connection of this industry to the real world, to the offline world. And because of this tight connection, there is no one regulatory framework that you can apply here, but you need to consider the regulatory considerations in each and every jurisdiction that you have connections to or you operate in, and they vary because there are places with different taxation issues, insurance issues, permits and licensing that are many times required in the travel or accommodation industries, regulations such as we just saw in New York City, where they limited the option of Airbnb to operate. The second type of challenges is that in the travel tech industry, the complexity of the legal connections or the legal relationships between the different service providers and players in the supply chain makes it very, very complicated in terms of things like cancellation policies, things like this example of splitting reservation because, for example, maybe the hotel has a policy that does not allow to split reservation or to combine reservation and to split them through or between different end users. So it brings issues of responsibility, of allocation of responsibility, of insurance, of cancellation policies, which makes it a little bit more challenging. And the third, as I mentioned, is something that we see in many technologies and technological industries, but in the area of travel tech is more complicated or it has a unique implementation because when you use private data of end users, when you scrap data from online websites, you face many challenges that can significantly affect your business and also the cost, as Gigi said before, the cost for businesses who are B2C businesses.
Well, every challenge is an opportunity. So
For us,
that's good.
you know.
For you, you always have a job. So in the way I see it in today's world, where we don't work anymore in silos. Everything is mixed. Hardware with software and media with mobility and things of that nature. We know that the underlying technologies are taking over. So machine learning, big data, AI, VR, AR, it's going to affect all verticals, all applications. And that's becoming interesting. So you talked about it. I think, Liat, you've mentioned this. That you are investing in related or things that are affecting travel and travel applications. So that's an area I want to ask you about, Gigi, with NFX. So I know you guys are now working you're swamped with applications, and you are focusing on robotics and AR and VR and machine learning and what else? AI. No, the interesting stuff.
Everything that's interesting.
No, but it's really interesting.
All the letters, yeah. All the 2 to 3 letter
Yeah.
acronyms.
No, but this is where the world
We
is
tried the
shaping.
1 letter acronym, we couldn't find anything.
No, but these are the technologies, the underlying technologies that are going to change our lives.
So yeah.
But the question is not NFX. It's how do you see travel-related startups suitable for NFX?
So let me tell you, the way I look at things is that every once in a while comes a new hardware platform, and this new hardware platform usually comes up later on. There's new applications on it, not usually, it's always. And the new hardware platform could be television, and then there's broadcasters, and there's production companies, and it could be the internet, and then on the internet there could be a browser as an infrastructure, and as an application there could be Google and so on. And whenever a new platform comes up, there are new applications that emerge in it, and in most cases these new applications are by new companies rather than by the old companies. Meaning that while TV companies could have become the winners of the internet, they were not, right? In many cases, many people say that this is now a bit different because the winners on mobile are the same winners as the internet, namely Google, Facebook, etc. But that's a different discussion. But anyhow, when you look at each one of these new platforms, they bring new opportunities. So to give you an example of what I'm talking about, let's say, for example, that we're talking about a new format, a new platform called mobile. So in mobile, in travel, I've invested in a company called KimKim. What KimKim does, it's a chat-based, it's a guy that was the head of mobile for TripAdvisor, a guy called Joost in the Silicon Valley, one of the best travel executives in the world. And he founded a company that basically, when you want to travel somewhere, you start chatting with somebody. You don't know, but in many cases it's AI. You start chatting with a person, and that person builds you the trip that you want by asking you questions back and forth.
It's a bot?
Many of the cases it's a bot. I don't want people to
3
know.
letters.
I'm sorry?
3 letters.
Bot, yeah. We dropped the O to make it two. So basically, it starts with a real person, but then as the system learns, it's becoming more and more AI, building you the perfect trip for you, and then with one click, you can book the entire trip, right? So this is a new thing. It was not possible in the past because the chat interface was not there really as a main interface on the web. Now it is on mobile, so it happens. Similarly, all these new platforms, and one could say that this is also AI as a platform, right, because of the bots and everything. Similarly, all these new platforms will have new implications also for travel. So for example, if we take, there's a company that just applied to NFX, and they're in the Valley, so I can tell you about it. They're called Teletrip. What they do is that they put telepresence robots in interesting places around the world that have VR cameras on them, and you can rent them by the hour to basically travel around the world. So they're closing deals now to put one in the Taj Mahal, so that if you want to go to the Taj Mahal, but you can't.
Real time.
Yeah, real time. Real-time broadcasting of VR. You're going to put your goggles, and there's going to be a robot there. You're going to pay for a fractional part of that robot, and you're going to travel. I don't know yet whether we're going to accept them or not, but as a concept, this is a new platform that's going to take the entire concept of travel and change it completely. I mean, why would you ever go to an hotel room without actually seeing the room, right? Why would you ever travel somewhere without actually finding out before whether what's written there, what's written about it is true or not? So this is VR getting into it. When you go into AR, for example, so why would you ever want to travel anywhere without having a system that when you look at the Eiffel Tower, it just tells you the history. It just tells you when it's open. It just tells you what you can do there and the rating and everything, rather than having to open your phone, start browsing for it, etc. Right? So this is AR in the service of travel. So each one of these new platforms brings new opportunities in travel. And if I need to leave you with one thing, is that if you're really passionate about travel, don't try to find the next thing on the existing platforms on travel, because this is mostly taken, right? So if you try to do something on travel on web or on mobile, this is mostly taken, right? Try to think how you can take these new platforms and how you can basically replace existing services that existed on the existing platforms with something that comes from the new platform. This is where the next billion-dollar company in travel is going to come from, not from doing another mobile app for travel.
It's true, although if you look into the industry and you listen to guys like Rom, they will tell you that most of the customers are way back and they need incremental changes, just not revolutions, not disruptions, just get them up to speed, up to date. So it's tempting for young companies to serve them.
So getting people up to speed is usually the job of the already established company. Right. So
that's what I'm saying.
When you've got 30% of people that book online on apps and the rest still don't, the job of serving the rest of the 7% is never the job of startups. Either unless if you're talking about, I don't know, Indonesia, and the big guys are not there, and maybe you want to go there. But if you talk about main markets, catching up of technology with the rest of the population, that's not the job of a startup. The job of a startup is to get the 30% that are at the front each time and potentially grow fast enough to become the winner in this new platform.
Exactly.
That's at least my view.
Totally agree. So Liat, have you done anything in that respect on the merge of travel and other disciplines with Marker?
So not specifically with Marker, what I just got involved with Cockpit and Innovation Hub, which is taking a look at travel that is kind of beyond looking at something that is specifically travel, but looking at what the travel industry may need. So it could be marketing services, it could be cyber, it could be value chain management for an airline. If you think about it, an airline is, and certainly talking to your point about backwards, I spent some time looking at monitors very recently, and that is about as backwards as you could get. So there is a lot of catching up to do in that industry. And I don't think it's necessarily travel, but it could be companies that service the travel industry.
Cool. And the last point on that, Yossi, I know you've been the first investor in Yotpo. It's a company in the retail space and basically a reviews platform. I would say the leading platform. But the point on that is that we've seen interest from travel companies, again, in retail. So again, merging two verticals or the combination of two verticals. And now that you are focusing on sports tech, do you see the connection between sports and travel? I mean, Eran mentioned mobility and travel, and so sports and travel?
Yeah, I think it's very difficult, like you mentioned, to put things in silos. We are highly interested currently in sports and travel and the combination. I don't know how much you're aware, but sports travel is the most growing segment of travel in the world. It's like $8 trillion business currently. It involves people that attend events either at their nation or around the world as fans that are viewing or following their teams or athletes. And it also takes into account people that are actively participating in events, being events, sports-based events. And altogether, it's a huge industry. You can see also in Israel some companies that are focusing on sports travel. There are plenty of agencies around the world currently focusing on sports travel. And even within the sports travel, there are some categories like the youth sports, which I think it's a category that didn't exist 5 years ago. Currently, it's the most fastest growing sector within the sports travel. There are 35 million kids in America that do organize what is called organized sports, and they travel. They go to play away games, they go to tournaments, they go to training camps, they take their parents, they take their friends, they take their family, and it became like a mini vacation events. So this is again another segment within that segment, and there are cities competing heavily to win, to host events in sports, from the Olympic to local events. So they are heavily investing in infrastructure, they're investing in facilities, they are investing in innovation, they're trying to win mainly the major events by innovation. So we are looking at innovation in the field of fan experience or participant experience, athlete experience within the stadium. Smart stadiums are relevant, and everything that deals around that field.
Thanks. We will probably have 5 minutes for questions, so just get your head spinning and we'll get there. So Eran, as an investor in Rumor, I think they recently raised, what, 7 million? What was that with the last round? Okay, no comments? Around?
Around, yeah.
Around. But they're doing pretty nicely on that end. I've met them when they were with you at Zell. So question is, what is the one key lesson that, as an investor and a board member, what is the one key lesson that you've learned from this journey so far?
So I think, well, we didn't know nothing about travel before, okay?
That's a good start.
Yeah, because, you know, we had a couple of investments in, you know, the chip industry, and we stopped doing that. And then we had a couple of experiments in the media, and we stopped doing that. So we didn't understand nothing in travel, and this is why we invested. No, but to be seriously...
The grass is always greener.
No, but to be seriously, first of all, it's going very well. But we learned a lot of lessons regarding, I mean, it's very slow industry. The technology platforms are very legacy. It takes a lot of time to connect with them. If you want to be a partner with Kayak, it will take you 3 years. It's very challenging. But on the other side, if you manage to be a partner at Kayak, it becomes a barrier. So there are always you know, the pros and cons regarding the pace that you can really move on. So it took much longer than we expected. And we also learned that, as I said, in the demand side, it's quite challenging. You cannot really beat the big players, but if you have something viral, and I would say that in Rumor, we have a huge amount of percent of users coming organically. It's something that really reminds what's happening in Airbnb. Of course, there's differences. But if you can build something viral, like Move It, also Move It the same thing. Move It 70% or even more are viral. So if you can really build this kind of thing, it's really disruption. Now, regarding all the legacy platforms, it takes a very long time, and it's very frustrating, and therefore you need to invest a lot of money in order just to see a starting point that something really happens. I can give you, I mean, just something a little bit different. VCs are looking for disruption, okay? If you cannot see an exit of $400 million and above, it doesn't fit to the model. We need to see that something really dramatically can happen. And we see a lot of startups in the travel industry that's doing optimization, all kinds of optimizations. And I can tell you from experience, we invested in 4 different kinds of optimizations companies. They all failed. The reason is that it seems dramatically reasonable in the time that you invest, but usually what happens with optimization, that there is a gap in the industry. these gaps are closing all the time because of many, many reasons. So be careful from optimization. Never say the word optimization to investor because you can just walk away. I mean, investors don't like optimization. And one more thing, be careful from features. There's a lot of companies that are doing some kind of a feature for the big players. The exit strategy in this, it will be probably between, I don't know, 20 to 30, maybe 50 million. It's nothing that VCs are looking at. It can be a very nice exit if you're an entrepreneur and didn't raise a lot of money, but it doesn't fit the VC model. So there's a lot of tips, what to do and what not to do. You're welcome after the session. If you want to ask me anything, you can add.
I'm willing to accept $300 million venture, so you can come to me. If it doesn't, go to Iran first. If it doesn't fit Iran, you are welcome to join me. Just to maybe to mention, I seriously, it's really challenging. It's difficult to raise funds for travel from professional investors, and it would be easier at first to raise money from angels, and I'm not talking about professional angels, I'm talking in general angels, not because they're stupid, some of them are very smart, but because it's something, usually travel, it's something everybody at least thinks he can understand. Unlike if you come with a cyber venture, or you come with a storage venture to a diamond dealer, he wouldn't understand anything, and it would be very problematic for him to evaluate. But if you come with something about travel, that at the end of the day, everyone in this room is traveling and can understand maybe the need, maybe the problem, it would be easier to convince them. As Eran mentioned, it's difficult to find ventures that can at least theoretically reach a substantial amount. With, I can tell you, with Travel Fusion, we had a lot of luck. When we invested in Travel Fusion at first, we actually did not invest in the idea that at the end of the day, was the exit company. We invested in idea how to reach from point A to point B, to find either the cheapest way, the fastest way. You can take a boat, you can take a bus, you can take a train, you can take a flight, you can ride a bicycle, you can combine between them. At the end of the day, the company gained so much information, so much data. They were connected to all the low airfares operators. They were connected to all the train suppliers as well. So at the end of the day, they had a lot of data, and what was sold at the end of the day, it's their data and their revenues.
Can I add one thing? I think because as Eran said before, there's no management here that's based on successful outcomes in travel. So it's much easier today to build a games company and raise money because there's all these people that made money in games and succeeded. Similarly in routers or whatever in many other fields. Because this is the case, and because travel is a very deceiving field. It's a very deceiving field because all of us travel. So because all of us travel, we all have a feeling that we know how the industry works, which we don't, right? So if I take all of you, and all of you are in the travel tech field, and I take you and I try, and I start asking you now, what do you think the agreements are between Booking and their hotels? The chance of even 10% of the people here knowing how it actually works are close to zero. Because that's the case, it's very difficult for investors to invest in people that don't come from the travel space. It's very easy to fool yourself and think that you know. And therefore, what I really recommend, for me to look at a travel company, if it doesn't have at least a person, at the minimum an advisor that's really involved in the company, that comes from the travel industry, it's almost impossible to invest in. The reason is because there's all these deals, all these kind of professional secrets that people in the industry would know, but us from outside the industry wouldn't know. So, if you're an Israeli company, you can't fund somebody. The only team that was in Israel, by the way, there was an Orbis team that was pretty good, and that's now no longer here. But the team is pretty much around, and they're helping lots of travel startups. Other than that, if you can't find here, go and get advisors from one of the large travel companies in the world, because otherwise it's going to be very difficult to raise. The second thing, in Israel, there's no such thing, but in the Silicon Valley, there's what's called the travel mafia. The travel mafia are roughly 15 angels, led by a guy called Eric Blanchard. Eric was the mythological CEO of Expedia, a great guy. And if he and his gang does not invest early on in a travel startup, none of the VCs will touch it. And so if you really want to go there, you need to find a way to get to these guys. All the Silicon Valley VCs, they're looking for these guys, for this particular group of people for vetting of any travel idea. And so, whenever I tried something, I tried to put it in front of them. If they don't like it, it's almost a dead end for fundraising. Doesn't mean that the business can't be good, but for fundraising, it's really difficult. So, read about it. There's lots of things that were written about it. Find out who these people are. Try to get to them. Try to get people on your board or advisory board or into your company that can actually bring you that credibility and that knowledge that will take you, years to come up on your own if you have to learn it from scratch.
Cool. Or join Innovel, and they will help you.
Exactly.
Any other closing remarks before we open it up for a couple of questions? We have like 5 minutes. We're good?
Yeah.
All right. Questions? Don't be shy. We can start with the second question. It's always easier. All right.
When the panel is so good.
Yeah. So I'll just throw another last question. Where do you see the big, if you see, the big opportunity or the biggest opportunity in this vertical? It's a tough question.
Well,
You have an answer?
yeah. Well,
Go
I
for
have
it.
my answer.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think that the other than all these new platforms that I spoke about, which are things around travel, if you wish, the one area that I think has not yet been resolved, and this is basically is going to come back, is the ultra personalization of trips and making it simpler to ultra personalize. So at the end of the day, and there's been many startups that try to hack it, but at the end of the day, when I look today at how I book a trip, the process is incredibly manual. It's incredibly reliant on information sources that are not necessarily right for me. And the outcome is not what it's supposed to be. Now, the gap is that to get to 100% precision or to 80% precision is okay, that's doable. But to get the other 20% right, that's a lot of work. And to get that other 20% right, that's all these buzzwords. It's AI, and it's a lot of NLP, and it's a lot of personalization and data mining and understanding who I am and understanding what I want and understanding that when pushing it to the extreme, when I'm alone, I don't care what size of hotel I stay in, but my wife can't stand large hotels and so on and so on and so on and so on. But eventually, it shouldn't be as difficult and it shouldn't be as complex as it is. The way this is being resolved now by a few startups, the one to look at is a startup called Lola, which from the guy that founded Kayak, is basically by putting the human touch back in. Because if you think about it, what our parents used to do, they used to go to the travel agent. Right. And while the travel agent maybe didn't have all the choices in the world, what the travel agent did have, it did have a perspective of who the person was, and a perspective of what each one of the hotels was. Because these travel agents, you may not remember it, but they used to be taken out to trips to see each one of the hotels and get to know them. And so when I came in, or when my father came in, they knew that he's not a fancy guy, so maybe send him here. And when somebody else came in, and so this personalized touch is being now put in being put back in digitally into the ecosystem. And whoever's going to hack that to get to the point where the last trip I did to Italy took me, hours and hours of planning to get it almost right. If I could get that to happen automatically and right, that is a multi-billion-dollar company, and this is where all the top talent in travel is going to right now.
Yeah. I think you're right, and I think it will happen, and I think it will happen by the nice buzzwords, by the AI and machine learning, because if we only had one person traveling and 20 agents working for that person, you would get the perfect trip. It's just not scalable. But with AI and machine learning, it is. So it will happen. I'm just waiting for another thing, business travel. If somebody can solve that crap, then we're...
Yeah, well, it's the same thing. The same thing, only with actually...
It's like your robots that you've mentioned, that the VR. If I could not travel and do all my business meetings just by sitting here.
I have a challenge for the entrepreneurs. For 7 years, we're looking for a company that will do the next thing. The travel industry is built upside down. When we go travel, we're looking for experience, for something unique. But basically, the process is first we find a flight, and then we find an hotel. It doesn't have anything to do with the experience or something that we really want to feel in the place that we're going to. Now, the problem is also that all the data is basically the same in all places. If you can find a way of how to build the right way for our next trip, or I don't know, fun, or whatever that we want to do, but build it the right way, coming from the experience, and then build all the other things, make it work, and make sure that the data, it doesn't come from all the other sources, but can come from, I don't know, from local people, from, if you want to go, well, I love going fishing, okay? Now, how can I find this boat that can take me fishing in Costa Rica? No one can really give me this information. Try to build.
We have the right thing for you. We have the, sorry to cut you off. We have just finished. We have the startup
Great.
pitch. We have the right startup for you. Just hang in, take the first seat, and we'll have everything ready for you. It's all waiting.
I just want to mention something. I see opportunity in the hotel industry. I think less about booking. There's a lot of innovation. There was a lot of innovation in the booking industry. I think there's still a lot of room, literally a lot of room, in the hotel industry. Today, think about it. You're going to the hotel and you have the same experience and you use the same card and they know nothing about you. They don't know if you're in the room, outside the room. You go down to the swimming pool, you want to have a Coke, you need to raise your hand. They don't know if you came back at 2 o'clock and now you're hungry and you want this or that. They know, in general, very little about you. And it's a huge market. And I think there must be an innovation in your experience in the hotel.
And I think just to carry on for that, I think hotels and airlines, I think they're looking for innovation. You see them building innovation hubs and innovation programs and trying to do it. So I think there's big opportunity on the B side too, on the business side. And frankly, although Israelis are great travelers, I think ability to do consumer probably mitigated relative to our ability to take big data, AI, all the other letters that we can put together, cyber, and put that towards the travel industry on a business, the business end.
Great. So thanks a lot. I've enjoyed it. Thanks all.